The air inside the chamber was calm, almost too calm, as though silence itself had taken a seat between the two men. Yet beneath that silence was a heaviness, the kind that did not come from walls or shadows, but from the gravity of what was about to be spoken. Sam Altman had crossed long distances to be here. He was known around the world for his work with artificial intelligence, for his futuristic visions of data, machines, and progress. But today he had not come for circuits or theories. Today he carried a question that machines could never answer. Across from him sat Ibrahim Traoré, a man whose voice had grown to echo beyond borders. He was not admired only for any title he carried, but because of the clarity of his words and the conviction with which he spoke. Ibrahim had a way of making silence meaningful, of making speech feel like it was not his alone, but carried the echoes of history itself. Sam's voice broke the stillness first. It was gentle, hesitant, like a man trying to choose his words with care. "Ibrahim," he began, his eyes flickering as though searching for an opening. "I've read books, I've studied, I've listened to lectures. Yet there's something that I cannot grasp. Judaism, I hear people discuss it. I read its history, but to me it feels incomplete, distant, as though veiled. You once said that if humanity truly understood Judaism, our way of seeing life itself would change. I came to ask, what did you mean? What is it about Judaism that shifts how we see humanity?" Ibrahim did not rush into an answer. He leaned back slowly, his expression calm, his voice steady when it finally came. It was as if he wasn't just speaking to Sam, but to centuries behind him. "Sam," he said, "too often people treat religions as fences. They ask, which group do you belong to? Which side are you on? They use belief as a tool for division. But faith in its truest form is not a fence. It is a mirror. And Judaism, more than most, holds a mirror to humanity's oldest wounds and deepest strengths. It is not only a religion, it is a story that stretches back further than empires, older than borders, older even than many languages still spoken today. If you reduce it to doctrine, you miss its soul. To see it properly, you must recognize it as testimony. Only then does it change you." Sam's hands tightened, fingers interlocked as he leaned forward. He listened with full attention, as if the words themselves carried a weight. "Judaism," Ibrahim continued, "does not begin with conquest. It begins with exile. Its essence is not empire, not domination, but wandering. It is the saga of a people who walked deserts, endured slavery under Pharaoh, exile under Babylon, who saw their temple consumed by fire under Rome, who faced persecution in Europe, who endured the Holocaust within the last century. At its core, it is the story of survival against overwhelming odds. It is the story of identity carried even when land was lost, armies destroyed, homes stolen. And yet they endured. Do you grasp the weight of that, Sam? A people who could have been erased countless times, yet they live." Sam's brow furrowed, his voice careful. "But today most people only see Judaism through conflict, through politics. They don't see this depth you describe." Ibrahim nodded, his gaze steady. "That is because the world is impatient. It hears only the noise of the present. To understand Judaism, you must listen to the silence of history. Picture a family gathered around a table on a Friday evening, thousands of years after exile. They light candles, bless bread, sing words that echo from the past. They are not merely sharing food. They are remembering. They tell their children, 'We were slaves once, but we are free now. We wandered once, but God walked with us.' These acts are not empty rituals. They are memory bound into flesh. And memory, Sam, is stronger than armies." Sam inhaled deeply, the image planting itself in his imagination. "Judaism is not about domination," Ibrahim pressed on, his tone gathering strength. "It is about covenant. It is about responsibility. When they say they are chosen, the world misunderstands. People think chosen means favored or privileged. No, chosen means burdened. It means carrying the responsibility of reminding the world of justice, even when the world wants to forget. It means living by laws that discipline the soul, even when the body longs for ease. It means clinging to faith even when exile mocks you, when nations enslave you, when tyrants burn your books. Chosen is not arrogance, it is accountability. And that, Sam, is why it changes how one views the world. Because if a people can carry their covenant through fire and survive, then what excuse do we have when we abandon our values at the slightest test?" Sam's eyes softened, his voice curious. That's powerful. But tell me, Ibrahim, what is it in their teachings that makes them endure like this? How can words, how can laws hold a people together across centuries of suffering? Ibrahim's eyes brightened. Ah, now you reach the heart of it. The secret lies in their laws and in their memory. Judaism does not only speak of belief, it teaches practice. Every aspect of life, eating, resting, working, studying, can be sanctified. They are commanded to remember the Sabbath, to rest, not only for themselves, but as a reminder that life is not just about production. Imagine that, Sam. In a world obsessed with progress and wealth, Judaism says, stop, rest, remember you are not a machine. Remember the Creator. That is not just ritual. That is resistance. Resistance against a world that would reduce humanity to tools. Sam leaned back, struck by the parallel. That's fascinating. In my world, in artificial intelligence, we fear creating a society where humans are treated like instruments, like extensions of data. But what you're describing, Judaism resisted that vision long before AI existed. Exactly, Ibrahim replied, his tone sharper. Judaism teaches that freedom without discipline destroys. Progress without morality collapses. Identity without memory dissolves. The Torah is not just a set of laws, it is a training ground for memory. Remember you were strangers in Egypt. Remember you were slaves. Therefore, treat the stranger with dignity. Protect the weak. Honor justice. Now, Sam, imagine if the modern world lived by that. Imagine if nations remembered their own scars before inflicting new ones on others. That is why Judaism matters. Not just for Jews, but for all of humanity. Sam's gaze drifted downward, his thoughts heavy. But many still don't see this side. They see conflict, stereotypes, politics. They think it's exclusive. Ibrahim's voice lowered, almost sorrowful. And that is the tragedy. Humanity often judges by surface, not by roots. Judaism is not about superiority. It is about testimony. Testimony that faith can outlast exile. That memory can outlive empires. That identity can endure even when reduced to ashes. When you truly hear their story, you begin to hear the universal story of all who suffer, who wander, who struggle to hold on to dignity. In the Jewish story, Africa hears its own reflection. Have we not too been enslaved, colonized, scattered? Have we not carried songs in chains, prayers in deserts, resilience in exile? That is why I say Judaism changes you. When you see it rightly, you no longer see it as foreign, you see it as human. You see yourself in it. Sam's lips parted, the connection dawning on him. So you mean Judaism is not only for Jews, but for anyone willing to listen to its story? Yes, Ibrahim said firmly. Because it is a mirror. It asks us, what story are you carrying? What covenant do you hold sacred? What values will you pass on, even when the world strips away everything else? The Jewish people show us that faith is not proven when palaces stand, but when they fall, and you still sing. That is why once you truly understand Judaism, your thinking shifts. You stop seeing religion as just dogma. You begin to see it as survival, as testimony, as covenant. And then you must ask yourself, what testimony will I leave behind? The silence thickened, not empty, but filled with weight. Sam's voice came quietly. I think I understand now. Judaism is not only about them. It is about resilience itself, about faith under fire. Ibrahim's lips curved into a faint smile. Yes, Sam. And once you see it that way, you cannot unsee it. Their rituals, their laws, their songs, they are not habits. They are lifelines, the very reason they endured when the world sought to erase them. And if humanity learns from that, perhaps we too can endure. Not just with technology, not just with science, but with soul. Sam leaned back, his heart unsettled in the most meaningful way. He had come searching for explanation, but what he received was a mirror held up to his own fears and hopes. Outside, the night was still, but inside the chamber, it felt as though a small flame had been passed across generations, refusing to go out. The night deepened, but the conversation between the two men carried on with a quiet intensity. Sam Altman sat in reflection, Ibrahim Traoré's words still reverberating in his mind. No textbook, no lecture, no polished academic essay had ever captured the essence of Judaism the way this dialogue had. For Sam, it was not knowledge he had received, but something closer to wisdom, something alive. Ibrahim, noticing the silence, did not rush. He understood that real understanding is born in the pause, in the way words sink deeper once spoken. He let Sam sit with the weight of what had already been revealed. Finally, Sam's voice returned, softer than before. Ibrahim, you've given me a perspective I've never encountered. But I must ask, why is Judaism so often misunderstood by the world? Why does it seem buried under conflict, stereotypes, even resentment? Ibrahim leaned forward, his expression steady, his voice low but firm. Because, Sam, humanity resists responsibility. And Judaism is not just faith, it is responsibility. And responsibility is heavy. When you remind the world of justice, the world pushes back. When you live by memory, the world mocks you. When you survive exile, tyrants despise you, because your very existence exposes their cruelty. That is why Judaism has always been misunderstood. It refuses to forget. It refuses to vanish. And when you do not forget, you force others to face their own betrayals, their own violence, their own hypocrisy. Nations would rather silence that mirror than stare into it. Sam nodded slowly, the meaning cutting through. So you're saying Judaism unsettles people because it refuses to let history vanish? Exactly, Ibrahim said firmly. In a world that prefers to move past its sins without repentance, Judaism insists that memory matters, that the past cannot be buried beneath convenience. Every Passover, they remember slavery. Every Sabbath, they remember creation. Every prayer carries exile within it. They turn remembrance into resistance. And that, Sam, unsettles a world that would rather forget. Sam's eyes softened as he absorbed the words. But isn't that the same for Africa? He asked suddenly, the thought spilling out. Haven't your people carried memory through slavery, colonization, oppression? Isn't there a parallel between the African story and the Jewish story? Ibrahim's face lit with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Yes, Sam, that is precisely why I honor Judaism so deeply. Because when I look at their story, I see our own. We too were chained, shipped across oceans, stripped of language, identity, and culture. Yet like them, we carried memory in songs and prayers and stories. They wrote theirs in scrolls. We drummed ours into rhythms, into chants, and though so much was taken, something remained. That is why I say Judaism is not foreign to us. It is a sibling story. When Africans and Jews speak to each other, it is exile speaking to exile, resilience calling out to resilience. And understanding that makes you realize that survival itself is a sacred act. Sam leaned back, astonished. I've never thought of it that way. I always assumed Judaism was closed off, internal. But you're showing me it is a testimony for the whole world. Ibrahim's tone rose with conviction. Yes, Sam. That is the great tragedy of misunderstanding. Judaism is not only for Jews, its wisdom is universal. Do not steal. Do not kill. Honor your parents. Pursue justice. These are not tribal commandments. They are the foundations of civilization itself. Now imagine, Sam, imagine if your technology, your artificial intelligence, was built upon such principles. Imagine if every algorithm remembered not just efficiency, but dignity. Not just speed, but responsibility. That is why I connect Judaism to your work. Because the same discipline they used to preserve faith is the discipline humanity will need to preserve its humanity in the age of machines. Without it, your inventions may outpace your morality. And what good is progress if it destroys the soul? Sam's brow tightened, his thoughts racing. That has always been my fear, that our progress runs faster than our ethics, that we lose our compass. But you're saying Judaism has carried a compass for thousands of years. Yes, Ibrahim answered, his voice unwavering. And that compass has been tested in fire. Think of it, Sam. Empires rise and fall, but their laws fade with them. Who today lives by Babylonian decrees? Who still obeys Roman codes? They are studied in history books, but forgotten in daily life. Yet Jewish communities, scattered across the globe, still live by laws given thousands of years ago. A child in New York recites the same prayers as a child in Jerusalem, as another in Ethiopia, as another in Russia. That is not mere survival by chance. That is survival by discipline. And discipline, Sam, is what the modern world lacks most. The words struck deeply. Sam sat in silence, wrestling with their implications. So you're saying Judaism teaches that humanity's future is not just about knowledge, but about discipline and memory? Exactly, Ibrahim replied. Knowledge without discipline destroys. Memory without action fades. Progress without morality collapses. Judaism weaves them together. Remember who you are. Discipline yourself to live justly. Let progress never blind you to covenant. If humanity embraced this, we would not only advance, we would endure. The room grew heavy again, but it was a weight of realization, not despair. Sam felt as though he were sitting in a classroom that was both history and prophecy, philosophy and faith. Ibrahim's words were not abstractions. They were truths lived and carried across generations. After a long pause, Sam spoke quietly. Ibrahim, you've changed how I see this. I expected theology, maybe a history lesson, but you've given me something else. You've given me a mirror, and it makes me ask, what memory am I carrying? What covenant am I honoring? What responsibility do I have even in the realm of AI? Ibrahim's face softened into a smile, and that, Sam, is the beginning of wisdom. Judaism does not hand out easy answers. It gives questions. Questions that press on your soul until you live differently. Why is this night different from all others? Why must we remember? Why must we pursue justice? These questions train the spirit not to accept the world as it is, but to struggle for the world as it should be. If you learn that, Sam, then whether you are Jewish or not, you will think differently. You will live differently. You will lead differently. Sam's eyes glistened, though he tried to hide it. Something within him had shifted, something that was deeper than logic, more enduring than data. Ibrahim leaned closer, his voice quiet but piercing. Sam, one day your technology will fade. Your companies will fade. Even your name may fade. But values endure. That is what Judaism teaches. Pharaohs are gone. Caesars are gone. Tyrants are gone. But the Jewish people remain. Why? Because when everything else was taken, they clung to values. If humanity learns that, then perhaps we too will endure the storms ahead. And that is why I told you, if you understand Judaism, you will change the way you think about everything. Sam lowered his head, humbled. His voice came as a whisper. I came here for knowledge, but what you've given me is wisdom. And wisdom is heavier than I expected. Ibrahim placed his hand over his chest. Wisdom is always heavy, my brother, but it is the only weight worth carrying. Do not fear it. Carry it, and it will carry you. The candles between them flickered as though stirred by unseen breath. In that moment, the centuries of exile, of memory, of faith seemed to press into the chamber. Two men sat together, one from Africa, one from Silicon Valley. Yet the space between them was filled with echoes of Sinai, whispers of prophets, songs of survival. The night outside was dark, but inside, the flame of memory burned steady, refusing to die, and Sam realized, perhaps for the first time, that technology could shape the future, but only values could ensure humanity survived it.